So I want to speak today about being on pilgrimage. We heard in our first reading from the prophet Elijah how he's on a bit of a pilgrimage, how he walked 40 days and 40 nights to the mountain of God, Horeb. So we're going to talk about pilgrimage and then what to do to be ready for this pilgrimage. And lastly, we're going to talk about joy. This theme of pilgrimage is something that's common in the Old Testament, particularly in Psalm 39 and Psalm 119. We're told that we're sojourners on this earth. We're just passing through. We're not yet arrived at our destination. Our true homeland awaits in heaven. And just think about how different this perspective is from the secular world around us. If you take God out of the picture and all these spiritual realities, this is it. This life is all we have. But that is not the Christian view. Something that reminds me frequently of this pilgrimage of life is the fact that we have so many funerals. Now, most people don't go to funerals all the time, but I go to them on a weekly basis. And in the little over a year that I've been here, I've done about 50 funerals. And that's not even counting the ones Father Matthias and the deacons have done. Truly, we are on a pilgrimage. We've not yet arrived at our homeland. Now, modern pilgrimages are a little different than they were in the ancient world. Nowadays, you get on an airplane, you fly to wherever you're going, you often will stay in a fairly nice hotel. Now, some parishioners were saying, Father, you shouldn't be making fun of us like that. Like, well, I get it. We want to be safe and we want to be in those better places. But in the old days, if you went on pilgrimage, you were taking your life into your hands. You could get robbed along the way. You could get murdered. You could run out of food and starve to death. It would take weeks or months, sometimes years. There had to be a certain level of physical readiness and attentiveness. So now let's translate that onto a spiritual level, this pilgrimage of life that we're walking through. Again, contrast this understanding with the secular one around us. The Christian understanding is that this pilgrimage is wrought with difficulty and trials and dangers. All around us, there's the patterns of sin that we can get caught up in. There are all the errors of our times, the thieves, so to speak, of relativism and materialism, all these things that are seeking to take away the joy of the gospel from us. And yet, so many people today look at life as if it's sort of a level playing field, sort of a neutral territory. You just are born and your life begins. You just kind of go out into your life and there's nothing to worry about. That is not the Christian understanding. We are walking in a battlefield. As St. Peter says in the New Testament, one of the most significant enemies out there is the devil, the evil one. He says he is wandering about like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. That is the pilgrimage we are all on, whether we want to be or not. That is the way this life is. So there needs to be this spiritual readiness, this fitness for this pilgrimage. And one of the reasons for this is because there will be difficult times. And we practice that spiritual readiness and fitness for the sake of those difficult times when they come, so that we're ready for them. One example of this is in our first reading from the prophet Elijah. He's at a bit of a low point in his prophetic ministry. The context for this reading is he just had that big kind of showdown with the pagan prophets. They all went up onto Mount Carmel. They put up a sacrifice on an altar. And first the pagan prophets went around for hours calling down their pagan gods to come and cast fire on the sacrifice. But nothing happened. And then Elijah steps up, and he just says a simple little prayer, and boom! God descends in a fiery column and consumes the sacrifice, the stones, the water, all of it. And immediately after this, Elijah takes all of those pagan prophets and puts them to death for leading the people astray. The problem was, the civil leader of that time, the queen, Jezebel, she was very attached to this pagan idol worship, and she was furious with Elijah. So she sends out all of her troops to go find Elijah and kill him. So here is Elijah, being faithful to the Lord, doing his prophetic ministry, and now his life is at stake. So he goes out into the desert and he says, "This is enough, O Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my fathers." He's at a bit of a low point, isn't he? And if this could happen to Elijah, this great prophet of God, one of these key figures in the Old Testament, it certainly could happen to one of us. Being faithful to God day in and day out, still times of difficulty may come. And it's for these times that the spiritual fitness and readiness is so important. And if you're looking for a more contemporary example of this, something that's been very difficult going on in the church right now is this whole scandal unfolding with Archbishop McCarrick. It's very challenging to our faith. I've heard from many of you how difficult it is when things like this happen. This scandal that was going on for decades, the prominent leader in the church and many other people knew about it, and nothing was done. And now, only decades later, is it all coming out. There are times of difficulty on this journey. And it's for these times that we need to be ready. So we're on pilgrimage, the journey of life. So the question is, what can we do for this spiritual readiness? How do we prepare? The first and most important thing is, are you praying every day? Are you maintaining that constant contact with God? Now, sometimes it seems like we look at prayer as if you can kind of binge on it. Sort of ignore God for weeks and weeks, and then maybe once a month come to Mass, come to confession, pray for a little while, and then you kind of forget about it for a few more weeks. Well, imagine if you tried that tactic with exercise. You want to get in shape, so you're just going to kind of slack off for a month or so, and then once you'll work out like all day. How well do you think that'll work? Probably not very well. And the same thing could be said about the spiritual life. What matters is that we're faithful, even just if it's for a few minutes, but every day. A few minutes every day will do far more good than just every once in a while. And do you read from the Bible? God's living, holy Word. The words through which we encounter God Himself. Divine revelation. Do you read about the lives of the saints, these holy men and women who have gone before us? Do you practice works of mercy? Consoling the sorrowful, visiting the imprisoned, giving food to the hungry. But most of all, and this is where our readings today come in, do you receive communion every week? Let's go back to that first reading. Elijah is off in the desert at this really low point in his ministry, and an angel comes to him and says, "Get up and eat, else the journey will be too long for you." He got up, ate, and drank. Then, strengthened by that food, he walked 40 days and 40 nights to the mountain of God. Christians from the earliest times have looked at this episode way back in the book of Kings as a little sign, a little pointer of the gift to come in the Eucharist. It is the Eucharist that is this food for the journey. Jesus comes to us every day, every week, and gives us Himself, this life-giving bread. This is our food for the journey. And he says to us today, just like that angel said to Elijah, get up and eat, else the journey will be too long for you. As you know, we've been reading through John chapter 6 these last several Sundays, this bread of life discourse. And Jesus tells us today in the gospel, I am the bread of life. I'm the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. So do you come to receive our Lord, this life-giving bread? And not just kind of out of habit, not just perfunctorily, but reverently, coming and striving to pay attention at Mass and listening to all the prayers and setting aside all the distractions and cares that may be on your mind. And do you receive Him worthily? And what I mean by that is, if you're conscious of grave sin, you be sure to go to confession before receiving communion, because this is necessary to make a good communion. And do you keep the hour-long fast from food and drink before receiving? All these ways in which we make ourselves ready to receive Jesus. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm really not interested, Father. I'm not up for all of this. What's so good about all this? I'm kind of fine where I'm at. Well, I have a question for you. You're on this journey. You're on this pilgrimage. And do you want it to be something that's difficult? Do you want it to be like that pilgrim who wanders off on some side trail by himself without any protection, without any readiness for the things that can come his way? Do you want to be burdened and weighted down? Or do you want this pilgrimage to be filled with the peace and the joy of having Jesus walk with you along this journey? Jesus wants our lives to be filled with the peace and joy of knowing Him. And listen to the words from our psalm response today. Psalm 34 says, look to Him that you may be radiant with joy. There's so many voices out there telling us that the key to happiness is in all these other things. Money, wealth, power, whatever. But the true key to happiness and joy in the midst of this pilgrimage of life is only Jesus. He is the only one that can bring true joy. And you see this in those people who, even though they may have nothing, they have Jesus. And so they emanate this joy to all those around them. So do you want this pilgrimage to be one of joy? And if you do, then today is the day to say, Lord, come and be more a part of my life. Come and walk with me on this pilgrimage. Help me to be faithful to you in the Eucharist and in the Bible and in all your teaching so that I can be prepared for this journey. So that I myself can be so filled with the joy and peace of knowing you that I can bring this joy to all those around me, so that all people can come to their true destination, their true homeland, eternal life, the home you have prepared for each and every one of us.